Hello, I'm Dr. William Lee, a physician and medical researcher dedicated to advancing health through evidence-based medicine and innovative approaches to disease prevention and care. What if the swelling in your legs and ankles is not really about your heart, your kidneys, or even the amount of salt you eat? What if the real reason your ankles puff up by the end of the day comes down to a single nutrient that most people over 50 are quietly running low on without ever realizing it? I want to be honest with you from the very beginning. When most people develop swelling in their lower legs, they are told one of three things. They are told it is their heart, they are told it is their kidneys, or they are told to simply cut back on salt and elevate their legs. And while those things can matter, what I have come to understand after years of studying fluid balance and circulation is that for a very large number of people, especially adults over 50, the swelling is being driven by something much smaller and much more correctable than any of those explanations suggest. It is being driven by a breakdown in the tiny cellular pumps that decide where the water in your body is allowed to go. And those pumps depend on specific nutrients to function. When those nutrients run low, the pumps slow down, and water that should stay inside your bloodstream begins leaking out into the tissue of your lower legs instead. Today, I am going to explain exactly how this works in plain language so you understand the real mechanism behind the swelling. And then, I am going to tell you about the one nutrient that sits at the very center of this entire process, the nutrient that controls whether those cellular pumps run properly or grind to a halt. Along with it, I will explain the two minerals that work alongside it because they all operate as a team. When you understand how these three work together, you will understand why the standard advice so often fails and what you can do instead. Before we go further, if you find this information valuable, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss what comes next. And leave a comment below telling me your age and where you are watching from. I read every single one. Let us start with what swelling actually is, because once you understand it properly, everything else makes sense. The medical term for the swelling you see in your legs, ankles, and feet is edema. Edema simply means an accumulation of fluid in the spaces between your cells. Your body is full of water, but that water is supposed to be distributed in very specific places. Some of it sits inside your cells, some of it circulates in your blood, and some of it occupies the spaces between cells, what we call the interstitial space. Under normal healthy conditions, your body maintains a careful balance between these compartments. Fluid moves out of the bloodstream into the tissue to deliver nutrients, and then it moves back into the bloodstream and the lymphatic system to be carried away. This is a constant balanced exchange happening every second of your life. Edema occurs when that balance breaks down and fluid begins accumulating in the interstitial space faster than it can be cleared away. The fluid pools, and because of gravity, it pools in the lowest parts of your body, which for most people standing and sitting throughout the day means the ankles, the feet, and the lower legs. That is why your swelling is worst by evening and often looks better in the morning. Overnight, when you are lying flat, gravity is no longer pulling the fluid down into your feet, so some of it redistributes and the swelling partially recedes. Then the cycle begins again the next day. Now here is the question that actually matters. Why does the fluid leave the bloodstream and accumulate in the tissue in the first place? And this is where we get to the real mechanism, the part that almost nobody explains properly. The movement of water in and out of your cells and your bloodstream is controlled largely by the balance of two minerals, sodium and potassium. Sodium is the mineral that primarily lives outside your cells, in the bloodstream and the interstitial fluid. Potassium is the mineral that primarily lives inside your cells, and water follows these minerals. Wherever sodium concentrates, water is drawn toward it. Wherever potassium concentrates, water is held there too. Your body works very hard to keep sodium mostly outside the cells and potassium mostly inside the cells because that precise balance is what maintains proper fluid distribution and even keeps your nerves and muscles working correctly. The structure responsible for maintaining this balance is called the sodium-potassium pump. It is a microscopic protein pump embedded in the membrane of every single cell in your body, and there are thousands of them in each cell. Their job is relentless and constant. They continuously pump sodium out of the cell and pull potassium into the cell against the natural tendency of these minerals to drift in the opposite direction. This pumping action is one of the most energy-demanding processes in your entire body. In fact, a significant portion of all the energy your body produces every day is spent simply running these sodium-potassium pumps. Here's what happens when those pumps stop working properly. When the pumps slow down or fail, sodium begins accumulating where it should not, in the spaces outside and around the cells. And, as I told you a moment ago, water follows sodium. So as sodium builds up in the interstitial space, water is pulled out of the bloodstream and into that same space to follow it. The tissue becomes waterlogged. And in the lower legs, where gravity is already working against you, this waterlogging becomes the visible, palpable swelling you have been struggling with. This is interstitial fluid retention. This is edema at the cellular level. So now the real question becomes, what makes the sodium-potassium pumps fail? Because if we can answer that, we can address the actual root of the swelling rather than just chasing the symptom. There are two major factors. The first is high blood sugar, and the second is a deficiency in the specific nutrients the pumps require to operate. Let me explain both because they are deeply connected. Let us begin with blood sugar, because this surprises most people. You do not have to be diabetic for this to affect you. Elevated blood sugar, even at levels below the diabetic threshold, causes a problem through a process called glycation. Glycation is what happens when excess sugar molecules in your bloodstream attach themselves to proteins. Picture sugar as a sticky substance circulating in your blood. When there's too much of it, it begins sticking to things it should not stick to. One of the proteins this happens to is hemoglobin, the protein in your red blood cells that carries oxygen and nutrients throughout your body. When sugar glycates your hemoglobin, those red blood cells become less flexible and less able to deliver oxygen and nutrients efficiently. Your blood sugar control over the previous few months can actually be measured through a test that looks at exactly this glycated hemoglobin, which tells you how much sugar has been sticking to your blood cells over time. Glycated proteins can also interfere with healthy circulation through the small vessels of your lower legs, the very vessels responsible for clearing fluid out of the tissue. When that small vessel circulation is impaired, fluid clearance from the tissue slows down and swelling worsens. But high blood sugar does something else that is even more directly relevant. It causes sodium retention. When blood sugar is elevated, the body holds on to more sodium, and as you now understand, more sodium means more water retention. The kidneys, in their effort to manage elevated glucose, end up reabsorbing more sodium back into the body, and the water follows. Over time, chronically elevated blood sugar also begins to damage the small nerves in the feet and lower legs, which is the beginning of what is called peripheral neuropathy, that numbness and tingling sensation many older adults experience. So even if you have never been diagnosed with diabetes, if your blood sugar tends to run high, particularly after meals heavy in refined carbohydrates, breads, pastries, sugary drinks, and processed snacks, it is actively contributing to the swelling in your legs through multiple pathways at once. Now, let us get to the heart of the matter, the nutrients that the sodium-potassium pump depends on, because this is where the real solution lives. The first and most important player is potassium. Potassium is the mineral that belongs inside your cells, working as the direct counterbalance to sodium. When you have enough potassium, it signals your body to release excess sodium and the water bound to it. In other words, adequate potassium actively helps your body let go of retained fluid. But here's the problem. The vast majority of adults do not consume nearly enough potassium. The recommended daily intake is around 4,700 milligrams per day, and most people fall dramatically short of this. Achieving that amount through diet requires a genuine, deliberate effort. It means eating potassium-rich foods consistently. Avocados are one of the richest sources, with a single avocado providing a substantial portion of your daily need. Leafy green salads, when eaten in real volume, contribute meaningfully. Berries, certain vegetables, and other whole plant foods all add to the total. The point is that potassium has to become a daily priority, not an occasional accident. When you raise your potassium intake to adequate levels, you are giving the sodium-potassium pump the raw material it needs on the potassium side of the equation, and you are directly signaling your body to shed retained sodium and water. The second player is magnesium. Magnesium is the mineral that most people overlook entirely, and yet it is absolutely essential to this whole system. Here is why. The sodium-potassium pump cannot function without magnesium. Magnesium is a required cofactor for the enzyme that powers the pump. Without adequate magnesium, the pump simply cannot run at full capacity, no matter how much potassium you consume. Magnesium also helps regulate how your cells handle both sodium and potassium, and it plays a role in relaxing the smooth muscle in your blood vessel walls, which supports healthy circulation in the lower legs. The recommended intake is around 420 milligrams per day for many adults. And like potassium, most people fall short. Good dietary sources include pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, leafy green vegetables, and other whole foods. Magnesium and potassium work as partners. You need both for the pump to function, and a deficiency in either one compromises the whole system. Before I tell you about the central nutrient, I want you to fully appreciate just how demanding the sodium-potassium pump really is, because this is what makes the next piece so important. Researchers studying cellular energy have estimated that somewhere between 20 and 40% of all the energy your body produces at rest is consumed by these pumps alone. Think about that for a moment. A fifth to nearly half of your entire resting energy budget is devoted to nothing more than keeping sodium outside your cells and potassium inside them. That is how fundamental this balance is to life. Your body considers it so essential that it is willing to spend an enormous fraction of its total energy maintaining it every second of every day, and anything that runs on that much energy is extremely vulnerable to an energy shortage. If the energy supply falters even slightly, the pumps are among the first systems to feel it, because they are consuming so much of the available fuel. This is the key insight that connects everything together, and it leads us directly to the nutrient at the center of the entire process. Now, here is the nutrient at the very center of everything, the one that ties this entire mechanism together, and the one almost nobody talks about in the context of swollen legs. Vitamin B1, also known as thiamine. Let me explain why vitamin B1 is so critical. I told you earlier that running the sodium-potassium pumps is one of the most energy-demanding processes in your entire body. Those pumps require a constant supply of cellular energy to keep pumping sodium out and potassium in. That energy comes from your cells converting the food you eat, particularly carbohydrates, into a usable form of energy. And the conversion of sugar and carbohydrate into usable cellular energy absolutely requires vitamin B1. Thiamine is an essential cofactor in the metabolic pathway that turns glucose into energy. Without enough thiamine, your cells cannot efficiently produce the energy they need. And one of the first systems to suffer is the energy-hungry sodium-potassium pump. In other words, even if you have adequate potassium and adequate magnesium, if you are deficient in vitamin B1, the pumps still cannot run properly because they are starved of the energy required to operate. The sodium builds up, the water follows, the legs swell. This is why vitamin B1 deficiency is so often the hidden factor behind stubborn edema that does not respond to the usual advice. And here is the part that makes this so common, particularly in older adults and in anyone who eats a typical modern diet. Consuming large amounts of refined carbohydrates and sugar actually depletes your vitamin B1. Here is the cruel irony of it. The more refined carbohydrate and sugar you eat, the more thiamine your body burns through trying to process it. And refined carbohydrates have had most of their natural thiamine stripped away during processing. So you are simultaneously increasing your thiamine demand while decreasing your thiamine supply. The result is a creeping deficiency that develops slowly and quietly over months and years. Exactly the kind of gradual decline that mirrors the slow onset of leg swelling that so many people experience as they age. So when you put this whole picture together, you can see why the standard advice of cutting salt and elevating your legs so often fails to solve the problem. Cutting salt addresses only one side of the sodium-potassium balance. It does nothing to restore the potassium, the magnesium, and the vitamin B1 that the pumps actually need to do their job. Elevating your legs uses gravity to temporarily move fluid, but it does nothing to fix the cellular machinery that allowed the fluid to leak out in the first place. You are managing the symptom while the underlying pump dysfunction continues unaddressed. If you are still watching and this is making sense of something you have struggled with for years, please comment the number 1 below so I know you are with me. It genuinely helps me understand what to cover next. Now let me give you the practical plan, the way to actually apply this understanding. First, prioritize potassium potassium every single day, aim toward that 4,700 milligrams target through whole foods. Make avocado a regular part of your diet, since a single avocado can provide a meaningful share of your daily need. Build large leafy green salads, because the volume of greens is what delivers real potassium, not a small garnish. Add berries and potassium-rich vegetables throughout your day. Many people are surprised to learn that the foods richest in potassium are not what they assumed. While bananas are commonly mentioned, foods like avocados, leafy greens, and certain vegetables actually deliver far more per serving. If you struggle to reach adequate levels through food alone, a high-quality electrolyte powder that contains potassium without hidden added sugars can help bridge the gap. Read the label carefully, because many electrolyte and sports products are loaded with sugar, which, as you now understand, works directly against you by depleting your thiamine and raising your blood sugar. One important caution here: if you have any kidney condition, you must speak with your doctor before significantly increasing your potassium intake, because impaired kidneys may not clear excess potassium properly, and that can be dangerous. For people with healthy kidneys, raising dietary potassium toward the recommended level is both safe and beneficial. Second, ensure adequate magnesium. Aim toward that 420 milligrams target. Include pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, and leafy greens regularly. Pumpkin seeds in particular are one of the most concentrated dietary sources of magnesium available. Magnesium is one of the most common deficiencies in older adults, partly because the magnesium content of many foods has declined, and partly because certain medications and conditions deplete it. Correcting it supports not only the sodium-potassium pump, but also muscle function, sleep quality, blood pressure regulation, and overall vascular health. Magnesium and potassium truly work as a pair, and addressing one while ignoring the other leaves the system incomplete. Third, and most importantly, address vitamin B1. The single most powerful thing you can do here is to dramatically reduce your intake of refined carbohydrates and sugar. This accomplishes two things at once. It stops the ongoing depletion of your thiamine, and it lowers the blood sugar that has been driving sodium retention and glycation. When you stop burning through your thiamine on a flood of refined carbohydrates, your body can begin to restore its thiamine status, and the energy supply to your sodium-potassium pumps can recover. Whole food sources of thiamine include sunflower seeds, legumes such as beans and lentils, nutritional yeast, and whole unprocessed grains in moderation. Some people with significant deficiency choose to supplement thiamine directly. And if you are considering that, a conversation with your healthcare provider is the right starting point. When you bring these three together, adequate potassium, adequate magnesium, and restored vitamin B1, while simultaneously reducing the sugar and refined carbohydrate that has been undermining all of them, you are addressing the actual root cause of the cellular fluid retention rather than just chasing the swelling after it appears. You are giving the sodium-potassium pumps the minerals they need and the energy they require so they can do the job they were designed to do, which is keeping sodium and water where they belong and out of the tissue of your lower legs. There is one more thing I want you to understand about why this particular combination of nutrients is so often missed, even by well-meaning healthcare providers. When you walk into a typical appointment with swollen legs, the standard process is to check for the serious causes first: the heart, the kidneys, the liver, and to look for blood clots. This is appropriate and important, and it should absolutely happen. But once those serious causes are ruled out, the conversation often ends with advice to cut salt, elevate the legs, and perhaps wear compression stockings. The nutritional and cellular mechanism, the potassium, the magnesium, the vitamin B1, and the blood sugar connection is rarely part of that conversation, not because it is unimportant, but because nutritional medicine is simply not the focus of most brief medical visits. The result is that millions of people with the everyday, both-sided gradual swelling I have described are left managing the symptom indefinitely, never addressing the cellular machinery that is actually driving it. I am not telling you this to criticize anyone. I am telling you so that you understand why you may never have heard this explanation before, and why taking some ownership of these nutritional factors yourself can make such a meaningful difference. Let me also address the timeline, because people always want to know how quickly they might notice a change. This is not an overnight fix, and anyone who promises that is not being honest with you. The cellular systems we are talking about respond gradually. As you restore potassium and magnesium and begin reducing the sugar and refined carbohydrate that has been depleting your thiamine, the sodium-potassium pumps slowly regain their function over a period of weeks. Some people notice a reduction in their evening swelling within the first couple of weeks, particularly if they were significantly deficient to begin with. For others, it takes longer, a month or more of consistent change before the difference becomes clearly noticeable. The key word, as with almost everything in health, is consistency. A single day of good potassium intake will not undo years of deficiency, but a sustained daily commitment to feeding these cellular pumps what they need while removing what has been undermining them allows your body to gradually restore the balance it was always designed to maintain. I want to be honest and responsible with you about something important. Swelling in the legs and ankles can have many causes, and some of them are serious. Edema can be a sign of heart problems, kidney disease, liver disease, blood clots, or other conditions that require proper medical evaluation. If your swelling comes on suddenly, if it affects only one leg, if it is accompanied by pain, redness, warmth, or shortness of breath, or if it is severe and persistent, you need to see a doctor promptly. The nutritional mechanisms I have described today are real, and they matter, but they are not a substitute for medical evaluation when swelling could be signaling something more serious. Use this information to support healthy fluid balance and work with a qualified healthcare professional to rule out and address any underlying medical conditions. But for the very common situation of gradual both-sided end-of-day swelling that worsens with sitting and standing and improves overnight, the kind of swelling that so many adults over 50 simply accept as a part of aging, understanding the role of these nutrients can be genuinely transformative, because what looks like an inevitable consequence of getting older is very often a correctable nutrient and blood sugar problem operating at the cellular level. Your body has an extraordinary system for keeping fluid exactly where it belongs. Thousands of tiny pumps in every cell, working every second of every day, maintaining the precise balance of sodium and potassium that keeps water in your bloodstream and out of your tissue. Those pumps are not broken. In most cases, they are simply undersupplied. They are short on the potassium and magnesium they need as raw material and short on the vitamin B, one they need for energy while being overwhelmed by the sugar and refined carbohydrate that depletes the whole system. Give those pumps what they need, remove what has been undermining them, and they will get back to doing the job they have always been capable of doing. That is the real story behind swollen legs and ankles. Not simply your heart, not simply your kidneys, not simply salt, but the cellular machinery of fluid balance and the specific nutrients that machinery depends on to function. If this video helped you understand your own body better, please subscribe so you receive the next one. Leave a comment below telling me your age and where you are watching from, and let me know whether this explanation was new to you. And if you know someone who has been struggling with swollen legs and has been told it is just aging, share this with them. The understanding in this video could be exactly what they have been missing. Thank you for being here, and take good care of yourself.